This is the Highly Sensitive Club, episode number 32.
Have you been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much? Do you have big feelings and deep thoughts you don't always know what to do with? I'm Stephanie Lynn, a certified life coach and highly sensitive person. I've helped dozens of highly sensitive clients feel more energized, more confident, and more in control of their high sensitivity. In these episodes, you'll get the information and inspiration to level up your life as a highly sensitive person too. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Club.
Hello, highly sensitive person, and welcome to this week's episode of the Highly Sensitive Club. I was recently having a conversation with someone about highly sensitive people and ADHD. Shout out to Laura. I hope you are listening to this one because I made it specifically for you. I thought I already had one of these episodes, but it turns out I have just given a lot of presentations and talked about the overlap between high sensitivity and ADHD a number of times, but I didn't have an episode yet. So here is your episode covering those two flavors of neurodiversity. The first thing that I want to point out is that high sensitivity is a trait. It's something that is in your genetics, and it is something that is not diagnosable, but that you can self-claim. If you identify as a highly sensitive person, if you've taken the quizzes, if you've heard the description of what an HSP is, and that aligns with you, you can self-identify as a highly sensitive person. It's genetic, something that you are born with. If you have ADHD, that is also something that you're born with, but it is something that's diagnosable. It's something that you can talk to a mental health professional and they can help you go through the process of becoming diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is what ADHD stands for. I know a lot of adults who have been seeking and getting the ADHD diagnosis, and suddenly it's helping them put together a lot of puzzle pieces that were kind of floating around from their childhood or from their early days, and it helps them understand why they're going about things the way that they're going about them, because their brain just works differently. There is some differences and some commonalities between high sensitivity and ADHD. Both of them are neurodivergence, or neurospicy, as I like to say, and they both have extra sensitivities and they're taking in more information than a neurotypical brain. There are also three things in common that overlap with both of these traits, high sensitivity and ADHD. The first one being overwhelm and some analysis paralysis. It happens for different reasons on both sides, which I will get into, but overall, when you're this type of neurodiversity, you tend to be more easily overwhelmed or to get stuck making decisions than other brain types. You also might be prone to distractions or have trouble prioritizing. And again, this shows up in different ways, whether you have ADHD or whether you have high sensitivity, but both of them are prone to distractions and some trouble prioritizing. Now, you are probably high functioning anyway. Many people go through much of their lives not knowing that they have high sensitivity or that they have ADHD or both. You have probably found ways to cope with both of these things, the overwhelm and the proclivity to distractions and having trouble prioritizing, but there are different reasons why both of these versions of neurospicy get into these obstacles. The third one is having shame or embarrassment about your brain just working differently. This is very common for people who are unfamiliar with their high sensitivity and are learning about it for the first time, but it's also very common if you have ADHD. In fact, a lot of ADHD people have told me that they have experienced a stigma of sorts from people who didn't know that they had ADHD or who don't understand how ADHD works. And there's a lot of judgments and a lot of opinions about these two types of neurodiversity. You just need to buck up, or you need to figure out how to do it, that you need to learn how to follow through, that you need to put aside your feelings and put aside your experience in order to get things done, getting really involved in that hustle culture. There's a lot that our society and our culture tells us about high sensitivity and about ADHD. So I wanted to share this episode with you today to help you debunk a lot of that shame or embarrassment that might be coming up for you because your brain just works differently. And also to show you how these two traits, whether you have them separately or together, actually work together to create something really, really interesting for you. As a brief overview, high sensitivity is a trait that makes you more sensitive to the world around you and to your inner world as well. It means you are physically more sensitive you take in more input and more sensations from the world around you. You probably have a lot more thoughts and you get into some really interesting places that a neurotypical person doesn't go. And your emotions are very deep and very intense, and you probably pick up on other people's emotions as well. ADD, attention deficit disorder, has been folded in recent years to the overarching attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnosis. If you have ADD or ADHD, then you have some other things going on. Your executive functioning skills might be a little bit lower than a neurotypical person. And the way that you connect the dots between things is probably a little bit from A to F to Z to J to H, and then back again to B. There's a little bit of a circular reasoning that happens because you're connecting different information in different ways than other people, which is why someone with ADHD is more prone to distraction or to starting things or to veering off into tangents because their brain is connecting different thoughts and different memories in different ways. This is why it can be very challenging for someone with ADHD to go through school, because our schools are designed to be extremely linear. There's a right answer and a wrong answer, and we want you to memorize things, and we want you to remember them in this way, and we want you to do it in this way. And that can be very difficult for someone with ADHD because the way that your brain works doesn't always draw connections in a straight line the way that a neurotypical brain does. Now, I want to talk about both of these traits and why they have the overlap between the overwhelm, the distractions, and the shame or embarrassment. For high sensitivity, there is a high concentration and a high level of focus. When you're highly sensitive, you're getting a ton of information from the outside world, and it's not something that you can necessarily turn off, which is why a lot of us are very concerned with our environment and making sure that it's quiet or it's comfortable or it's cozy, because we can control our environment so that we can actually focus on the things that we want to focus on. We also are weighing many factors at once because we're taking in all of that input. So when we're making decisions, we're weighing how it affects other people, how it affects us, the logical thing, the rules that we've received, all of the different methodologies and the frameworks and the tools that we've taught on how to solve the particular problem that we're dealing with at this time. We're weighing a lot of things, and then we're trying to sort through our particular filters to figure out which way is going to work best for us. When you're highly sensitive, you probably get caught in details pretty frequently because, again, with that high level of input and with your consideration for your own energy levels and for how it's going to affect the people around you, in addition to the information that you're taking in, then it can be very easy to get caught up in all these little things, or to have the opposite, where you're so big picture and you're so conceptual and you're so broad that you have trouble bringing it back in. You live much more easily in the realm of concepts where it's a little bit more vague, but you have a good sense or a vibe of what it feels like, versus getting into those specifics and the smaller details where you can actually create something from the ground up. And for high sensitivity, your batteries drain really quickly. And that's because we're processing so much information, we're feeling things so intensely, and we're using a lot of brain power on our thoughts from day to day. So if you need 8 to 10 hours of sleep, that is very typical for a highly sensitive person. All of these things contribute to that overwhelm, the shame and embarrassment that you can't do as much as other people can, or the way that you focus looks a little bit different than other people. You might have trouble prioritizing because you're weighing so many different factors that you're not entirely sure which one's most important or which one's urgent. And you probably have a lot of distractions because you're taking in all of that input. I am sure you've had the experience as a highly sensitive person of going somewhere where it's crowded and there's a lot of noise, or the temperature or the sensations are just so overwhelming, you can only stay there for a short period of time before you need to leave and recharge. On the other side, if you have ADHD, you might have low focus at times because you're getting distracted by things, or you might have hyper focus at times. Now, this is where there's a little bit of overlap between high sensitivity and ADHD, because highly sensitive people can also focus for long periods of time. But there's something that I've noticed with my loved ones and with my clients who have both high sensitivity and ADHD, that the type of hyper focus you have with ADHD is so much more intense than someone with high sensitivity. If you have just high sensitivity, you can absolutely get lost in something that you're super interested in and something that you're learning about that challenges you, and to bring in that focus. But if you have ADHD, you can get lost and literally time does not exist. You get into something and you get so involved in it that everything else just kind of fades away unless someone comes and taps on your shoulder, or you get that text message, or you get that thing that breaks you out of the hyperfocus. In fact, I know quite a few ADHD people with high sensitivity who have purposely gone into hyper-focused states so that they can get more done in a shorter period of time for very specific goals. That's really interesting to me. Another thing about ADHD is that moving on often makes you feel like your original task is completely gone. If you're working on connecting your devices to your internet, for instance, and then you get called away to dinner, it is like working on the Wi-Fi has completely disappeared until the next time you encounter it. It's much like everything that you were working on before gets left in the past until you have an additional trigger to bring you back to it. People with ADHD are very interested in novelty, in what interests them, and what excites them. So it's a little bit harder for someone with ADHD to grind through something because their brain is just not wired for that. If this is you, it's okay that you like new things. It's okay that you like to start something fresh and you have this big burst of energy when you're beginning something, and then you lose it over time because the novelty starts to fade. There are ways that you can continue to make something feel new even as you're building it over time. And people with ADHD tend to have excess energy. They might not sleep as well or as easily. There's a lot of energy that they want to put into the things that are important to them or into the things that they just have to do throughout the day. This is interesting because I'm sure, as you've noticed, there are some overlaps and some things that go well together, but there are also some things about having ADHD and high sensitivity that actually work against each other, like the low focus from ADHD, but the high concentration or focus from high sensitivity, or how sometimes the hyperfocus from ADHD can be compounded with high sensitivity. It can also mean if you're caught in the details on one side, then you might be energized by bringing in novelty or a new perspective on the other side. And if highly sensitive people's batteries drain quickly, people with ADHD have a lot of excess energy. It's interesting to see the way that this shows up for you as someone who has high sensitivity and ADHD, or one or the other. You might have aspects of both of these traits, or you might have a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one. So you might be one of those people who has all of the traits of high sensitivity and all of the typical traits of ADHD, and the way that those two interact with you makes it look like you're very empathetic. You are great at making sure that everyone around you is taken care of and that you're doing everything you can to make them feel comfortable. The level of focus that you can bring into things is probably great for learning and for education and for even self-study. I know a lot of people who have high sensitivity and ADHD who didn't necessarily benefit from a traditional academic structure, but they're excellent at teaching themselves new skills, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, and picking up those skills and incorporating them into their lives. If you have ADHD and you have high sensitivity, your window of tolerance for input is going to be much more narrow than the average person or even just a highly sensitive person. Highly sensitive people can be very easily overstimulated. And so it's important that they gauge their energy levels so that there's plenty of time for rest and there's plenty of time to do the things that we want to do. For someone with ADHD, there's a lot of excess energy, but they also need to have that novelty and that newness and the regular stimulation that keeps them interested so that their brain can be occupied enough to focus on the things that they want to focus on. If you have ADHD and you need that constant stimulation, that might feel like it's at odds with your high sensitivity, where you need to take a break from stimulation. So this is where that narrow window comes in, where if you have both, and I'm thinking of a couple clients that this is the case too, then there's an ebb and flow throughout the day of high stimulation, break stimulation, or the type of stimulation that you are looking for might change throughout the day. So when you're at your highest energy points in the day, you might be looking for high stimulation in order to help that ADHD have what it needs to focus. And then at other times of the day, you downshift it a little bit. So the type of stimulation might be a little easier. It might be something where you're on autopilot. And that's the way that you can help your high sensitivity start to recharge while you're also keeping yourself somewhat active so that you can keep your ADHD happy as well. I was just talking to someone who is both highly sensitive and ADHD the other day. And one thing that I have come to the conclusion about is that we have developed these traits and these conditions because there's an evolutionary purpose for them. If you have ADHD or high sensitivity or both, there is a reason and there's a benefit to having it, or we wouldn't have it at all. This helps me from a purely biological evolutionary standpoint to remember that there are wonderful things about my high sensitivity on the days when it feels overwhelming. And there are wonderful things about having ADHD, even though, yes, it comes with a lot of challenges, and that's true too. If you do have both, you are one of those people that can dive wholeheartedly into things that are super interesting and super important and meaningful to you. And if you have that highly sensitive trait, you can actually have a lot more stamina to get into deeper places and to stay there. Another way that having high sensitivity and ADHD benefits you is that you have a lot of empathy for other people because you have faced these challenges that come along with these traits and this condition. You have a lot of empathy and understanding for other people that a neurotypical person doesn't necessarily have. You probably hang out with other neurodiverse people or people who are friendly to your own neurospiciness, and you have a lot of encouragement and a lot of compassion for other people when they're just not willing to do the productivity and the hustle. That's a gift. And it's something that you have that other people don't necessarily have naturally, but it comes naturally to you because you know what it's like to face these challenges and these obstacles and what it feels like when you do receive compassion and understanding for them. The third way that having both ADHD and high sensitivity is a huge benefit is that you probably process information in really interesting and unique ways. Highly sensitive people can pull together stuff from different areas and then kind of meld them together in this new way to create something that feels original or fresh or creative, even if it's just your take on a particular topic. If you have ADHD, the way that you connect the dots also might create some unusual ways that you're putting information together. This is wonderful for coming up with new ideas, for coming up with new models, new concepts, and new products or services or ways that you can help out at your job. Both of these ways that you're seeing the world differently than a neurotypical person are actually a huge gift because it helps you with your creativity, it helps you problem solve in different ways and to think outside of the box, and it makes you curious. Highly sensitive people and people with ADHD tend to like to learn new things, whether that's to satisfy a need for novelty and interest and fun, or whether that's the need for getting deep and processing and getting into information that really, really excites you. Either way, you have this beautiful gift of being able to put information together in unique and unusual ways so that you can actually see more than a neurotypical person. Whether you have just high sensitivity or just ADHD, or if you have both, I hope that this episode has helped you see that there are actually benefits and there are some really cool things that come out of having this trait or this condition or both. And that even if you do have both, which I'm finding that a lot of my clients do, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with your brain. It's actually just got some interesting things for you to work with. And the more that you learn about your high sensitivity and about your ADHD, the more you can figure out the way that works for you individually so that you can get the things that you want out of your life. You can live the way that you want to. And it doesn't have to slow you down that you have high sensitivity or ADHD. Both of these things can be huge benefits to you, and they can help you see the world in such amazing ways. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you on the next one, my dear highly sensitive person.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to take what you learned today to the next level, head over to Stephanie Lynn, that's LINN.com, and book a consultation call to get started. I can't wait to see you there, my dear HSP.